Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great. Who are we talking to today?
Today we are talking to Mark Matthews, who is the creator and host of Inside the Mix podcast. And he's also a music creator and does mixing and mastering for people. So it's really what I know about him, but I know we're going to find out a lot more.
Great. Let's get into this.
Mike's on mics. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I am Mike Nimmix.
And I'm Mike Dow.
Welcome to the podcast. We appreciate you being here.
No, I appreciate the invite. It's thanks to Eric for the warm introduction.
Definitely. We rely on previous guests to connect us with people we otherwise wouldn't. So this is great. And you're the first international. So yay.
Ah, fantastic. That's always nice. Yeah, you got the first Brit and international on there as well. So yeah, happy days.
Right. Pin that.
It's quite nice being on the other side of the microphone and being the one being well, I say interviewed, but not it's not my podcast, let's say. It's quite nice.
That's what it is. Yeah. You got it. Nailed it. We usually go with a little bit of history, and then I guess the first thing we'll ask is, how do we even know you?
Eric, an artist by the name of Dream Commander, who has been on my podcast a few times. So I used to do a feature, which is where producers would come on, share their music, and we'd critique and talk about it. And he was on that frequently, and he was also on one of my what's called a producer kickstart episodes, which is where a producer, an artist, mix engineer, whoever comes on the show, and they have a pain point, and then offer some tips and tricks to overcome that. And I'm fairly certain he was just a listener of the podcast, and then it just through conversation through Instagram, which is sort of like my main hub. I sort of got talking to Eric, and this is how I find myself here. So thank you, Eric. Big shout out to him.
Thanks, Eric.
Definitely. Yeah, I was wondering about that because are you in Bristol, correct?
No, I am just down the road. I did used to live in Bristol, so I'm just on I say the road. It's about an hour down the road, and I live in a place called Exeter, which is a bit further into the southwest of England.
Okay.
Quite sleepy down here compared to. I don't know if you've ever been to London, but if you go to London, it's quite fast paced. Down this way, it's not, which I quite like.
I was fortunate to do a year of university in Lancaster.
Okay.
I never got out Bristol
No
way. I did get to Cardiff across the.
Oh, Cardiff's fantastic. I lived there for about 3 years. Absolutely loved it there. Yeah, like a second home for me. And then Bristol is basically just 45 minutes along what we call the motorway. And then you're in Bristol. You can get anywhere in the UK pretty quick compared to the States. Like, I'm fairly certain the UK could fit inside, or certainly England could fit inside one of the states.
I like that you're measuring distance and time. We do that here in Texas as well.
I'd love to go to Texas. Absolutely huge place, isn't it?
Come visit.
Yeah, you should definitely come visit. There's lots of it.
Yeah, I would get absolutely nuked by the weather as well, because like it is nothing like what we have here. Like 28 degrees and everybody's in shorts over here.
October to April and you're good.
Okay, cool. I'll do that then.
Yeah, that's about right.
So can you pinpoint a time in your life when you kind of grabbed onto music and were just like, this is magical, this is something I want to do, I'm inspired?
It's an interesting one because I didn't really I grew up in a household with music, but there weren't any musicians. So I was always, my folks would always listen to music, various different genres, as it were. My dad was a big Madonna fan, which was also, Madonna's always been there in the background for me, and ABBA, and there's a band called Slade, which we have, and he's a huge Rod Stewart fan as well, as is my mum. So I've got this sort of plethora of random influences. But it was, I lived next door to a guitar. He worked in a guitar shop anyway, and he sold me a guitar. I'd always been interested in music and wanting to perform. I think that's what it comes down to, and that's why I like the podcast as well, because there is a performance element to it. And in a previous life I was a teacher as well, so I was in a band, so I've always had that performance element. I've always wanted to create music and share that music, and I found the guitar through him, and I bought this guitar for about 30 quid and didn't know how to tune it, and I was playing it out of tune for about 18 months, probably 2 years, and I was trying to play, this was about the mid-noughties, and I was moving into sort of like new metal and that sort of stuff, because I'm a metalhead at heart, and I was trying to figure out like why doesn't it sound the same? I'm playing this bar chord, like a bar chord's pretty straightforward, right? And I was like, why does it sound so bad? And then I realized, oh, it's out of tune. So yeah, originally I wanted to play the saxophone, and I was totally, and then there were like gatekeepers at my school. They're like, right, here's a slip, fill in the instrument you want to play from this list. So I handed in saxophone, and they're like, no, you can't. So you didn't give me a reason.
Because everybody else wants it too.
You know, I think there was one other guy who played saxophone, and I remember because he was a friend of mine, and on the last day of school, of secondary school, and he played Baker Street as his finale, and I played Smells Like Teen Spirit in this band. And so at that point, I was like, you know what? If I can't play saxophone, I'm going to play guitar then in that case. My parents wouldn't let me play the drums. That was never going to happen. I picked up the guitar, and then it led me down this pathway because I found the music I'm interested in at the time. It sort of was like softer rock. And I bought Total Guitar magazine, and I also used Ultimate Guitar as well to get tabs. And that basically, I found like rock, then it moved on to metal, then heavy metal, then I went down to death metal, and then it went all into that, and I was in a death metal band and stuff. And then I sort of came out the other side, and now I do synth-based stuff. So I think there's always been that like synth pop, synth wave, 80s, retro 80s sound of music that's always been there, probably for my parents, to be fair. But yeah, that's essentially it. It was my next door neighbor. He had a big influence on me moving in the sphere that I'm in now in terms of music, which I've been, Christ, when was that? Like when I was 12, something like that? And I'm mid-late 30s now? Yeah. Christ. Yeah, it's a long time.
It can get kind of depressing when you start thinking about actual time periods. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was thinking then about that performance they did at school, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was 20 years ago. I'm like, Jesus. Mad.
So how did you turn from metal to getting into synths? And I'm saying this in a really curious manner because, you know, I grew up programming synths and listening to a lot of Brit synth pop and things like that.
Yeah.
But then I would, you know, lock the doors and roll up the windows, and I'd be doing the Iron Maiden and the Judas Priest and some of the heavier Rush and later Megadeth, blah, blah, blah. Because I don't know. I mean, I can relax to that stuff, but I can't write it.
Yeah. It's I was listening to Judas Priest earlier, actually, funnily enough. What triggered it for me was I was recording an album with this band I was in, and we were in the studio, and this is how I got into wanting to mix and produce music and music production as well. I saw the engineer, and I was like, well, I want to know how he's doing that. So I was on the other side of the glass. So I was just like, I want to know what he's doing there, because I could see Cubase. And I was thinking, okay, well, I can see the tracks. And I had a basic understanding, but I wanted to know more. So I then went forward and did the academic route. So I went and I've got a master's degree now in music engineering and production. Wow. But this started out in like, I was doing an evening course just so I could get the, what we call UCAS credit. So I could then go on to do a degree in it. Because what I had wasn't in the right ballpark originally. And in doing that, there was a module which was on sound synthesis and sampling. And we got to use Reactor and create a synth. And I started to play around with oscillators, waveforms, LFO, envelopes, and manipulating sound. I was like, actually, this is really cool. I'm quite logical in that respect. I like computer science and I've always had computers around me. So I was like, okay, this is kind of like marrying up to things that I really like doing. And then I just went on from there, and I was like, okay, so that's Reactor. What other synths are out there? And what can I do with those other synths? And it was all VSTs. I have had the opportunity to use, like, we used a Melotron on one album, and I've played around. I've never owned these other synths. I've managed to play around with them, like on Moogs and DX7s and stuff, but I've always had the soft versions of them. That small exposure doing that one module led me down the route of, you know what, I really like synths. And it's because you are not limited in terms of what sounds you can make. You're only limited by your imagination. And I think through the podcast, I've chatted, not recently, but I think in its inception, I chatted to a lot of synth artists. I'm going to get more on actually next year. And a lot of them came from an alternate rock, metal, rock background. And it was interesting because I thought there must be some correlation there. And I think for me, it's because I can recreate heavier sounding music and dark music using synths quite easily. And I can do it all in the box as well. And I'm only limited by my imagination. I can write metal to an extent. I was never the best guitarist in the band. And luckily we had two. So any mistakes I made, he was much better than me, and he sort of made up for it. But yeah, that was initially how I got into synths, was that one module we did all those years ago. And then I've always, like I said, I've always loved that synth sound, that retro wave, synthwave sound from the 80s. And obviously recently, in the last 5-10 years, even now, there's a plethora of amazing synth artists out there in the retrowave and synthwave scene. So it's pretty huge, and it's a great community as well. To be fair, yeah,
Definitely.
I want to go back to the guitar. You were talking about your guitar was out of tune. I think this happens to everybody. I certainly remember a point when our band went on stage, and you're a young kid and you got your guitar, and you're supposed to tune it, but it's not the most favorite thing to do. And since you're new to it, probably not great at it. You'll throw on new strings, you'll know that they'll go out of tune, so you tune it a couple times, whatever. But I just remember like one of our first or second shows that we're playing, and we didn't pay as much attention to tuning the guitar because it was something that in our minds it was not important. We said, it's more important to have the flow of the show and just keep playing and whatever. But then we listened back to a recording of it, and it was like, oh, guys, we need to make that a priority. And then we invested in tuners that would be on stage with us that we could see. And we would stop the show and we would say things like, hey, thanks, I'm glad you liked the last one, but we're going to tune because we care. I feel you from that viewpoint.
Yeah, I admittedly, like I wasn't performing at this point, and I've got a tuner, and then I tuned it. But yeah, it was a learning curve, and then there was that sort of light bulb moment when I was just like, okay, so I was playing it right. It's just because the guitar was out of tune,
right? Well, and also you're you learn a lot of things. Like you don't just tune a guitar, you don't throw new strings on, tune the guitar, and then it just stays in tune. No, you're going to be tuning that guitar for the next hour. Because you're going to play it, it's going to go out of tune. You're going to play it, it's going to go out and fix for the next couple of days, depending on how often you play the guitar, right? Like, so, and these are just things that nobody tells you.
And then you get a Floyd Rose as well, which is an even more of a, now I outsource now. I'm just like, oh man, if my guitar needs, my Floyd Rose needs, both my Jacksons, my DKMGs, they're both Floyd Rose. And I'm like, I used to do it all the time. I remember playing one gig and we used to play in drop B. So we'd have to have some thick strings. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm going to try some thinner strings this time. And this was before we were due to go on a mini tour in Northern Europe. And then I was just like, so I'll try thinner strings. That way I'll be able to get my string bends will be better. Get on stage. And I was like, okay, my guitar's not in. And it went
and it's gone.
First show, it was absolute rubbish. So yeah, that was a learning curve. Yeah.
I don't know what the phenomenon is of always wanting to try something new immediately before a live performance, which is probably the worst time to do it. Like, hey, I'm going to try this new thing. Yeah.
I got a great idea.
Yeah, it's the same with my amp as well. I had a 6505, which was like pure metal. Like the clean tone was rubbish, and I'd be like, and I get the sound dialed in, and then before the next show, I'd be like, I'm just going to tweak it a little. It's like, why am I tweaking it? Like it was perfectly fine how it was before. And there's no need for me. But I'm like, just go in there and tweak it a little. Maybe I could get it that 10% better. I'm just like, no, it's gone now. So tell you how whack.
That was a terrible idea. All right. Well, and then to your other point, you were talking about metal versus synth, and so I remember being in my band, and I certainly wanted to do kind of synthy poppy stuff, but the band, it wasn't that sound, and so you just end up kind of going with what your band's sound is, rather than something that I'd say peer pressure definitely had a lot to do with what I was doing at the time.
Yeah, I think as a band, we had some like piano elements, and there was one song where we had an outro, which I said had the Melotron, but it was kind of buried in the mix, so it was never really at the forefront. But there are limitations to working in on your own. Obviously, I've got other artists I can send. Okay, I've got this idea. What do you think? But I don't have the other four individuals in the room to be able to bounce ideas off of. So there are pros and cons, I think, to both approach that I find. But now, like one song on an EP I put out last year, I found some rainforest and music, sort of soundscape, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to put that on there because it sounds good. And like I don't have four other individuals saying, no, I don't know about that. So it's quite nice. But going back to the metal and synth side of things, there is a subgenre of metal called symphonic metal. So it kind of like that's like the pure marriage of those two interests there.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I've probably made stuff that would fit in that category then. But the Melotron, was that a VST?
No, we actually had a Melotron in
And the actual one.
Yeah. They were like used on Strawberry Fields. Yeah.
Whose garage did you find that in?
That was it was the engineer producer. What was his name? The studio was called Carl Groom. That was it. So his studio is called Thin Ice Studio. If you ever want to look it up, he did he produce? He certainly did the mix and the engineering for Dragon Force. Did he do Through the Fire and the Flames? He may have done. I think
Is Dragon Force the band name?
Yeah. Dragon Force. So
Nice.
quite a big metal. Are they metal? Yeah, they are metal. It's like speed metal. It is like Herman Lee and Sam. I don't know if Sam Tottenham's in the band anymore, but there was no way I could play as fast as those guys. It was just insane. But yeah, so he had the Melotron, and it was in the corner of the room, like you say. And we had this elongated outros we do in metal. And we're like, you know what? We need some keys on this. Okay, well, there's a Melotron over there. Let's give it a go. So we just some really basic chords. I can't even remember what track it is. That's got it on there. I'll have to probably go back and listen to the album. But so that was quite cool. That was cool. The rest of it was just VSTs.
Are you familiar with Melotron, Mike?
I've heard of one, and I think I've even seen some stuff on them.
It was a crazy, let's call it maybe an analog rompler.
Okay.
It had links of tape inside, and when you depressed a key, it played that piece of tape.
That's right.
So whatever sounds were on that tape was what you got off the keys. But it was basically an analog sampler, rompler keyboard from the, I don't know, late 60s, early 70s.
It's a big unit, isn't it? It's a big white unit. It's there's that classic story where it was used on Strawberry Fields where they had to
that's where it is.
detune they changed key I think they changed key or they did detune. I can't remember what they did, but it goes like that at the beginning. When using the Melotron. So no, it's cool. It was nice to be able to use it. I think when you've got hardware synths like that, because with VSTs, they sort of replicate them, but then they add all these other bells and whistles. So I think sometimes it's quite nice just to have the original and have those limitations. Because you think the amazing songs that were written using those instruments with those limitations. And I think it goes the same with like mixing in general. I mean, if I look at my plugin library, it's not huge, but I'm thinking like there were so many classic albums that were written with like a tenth of the arsenal that I have at my fingertips now with those limitations. So yeah,
I think limitation breeds creativity sometimes.
Yeah.
It sharpens your skills as well. Like just knowing kind of the basics, right? We used to record in an apartment, and of course, the air conditioner, you don't want it to be on, and the refrigerator, you don't want it to be on. So you would turn these things off, and it would get nice and quiet, and it's the middle of the day, and nobody's there, and so you can kind of record like you're in a studio. But just knowing those limitations, and even the old 4-track stuff, that's the kind of stuff that, you know, it just sharpens your skills. Even up at the university, we have a giant studio, 10,000 square foot studio, where they used to shoot Austin City Limits. And in the studio, there's these giant air handlers. And in the audio control room, there's a big switch to turn off the air handlers. But the thing is, had I not recorded in my apartment when I was much, much younger, I wouldn't have even thought about, oh yeah, turn these things off so that you have a nice noise floor while you're recording. You know, it's something you want to do whenever the Garth Brooks or the whoever comes through.
Those are the key moments, aren't they? Like what I was saying earlier about like tuning a guitar and just being in the studio and then knowing to make sure it's conducive to the recording setting and the setting. You're really going to learn trial and error, you know?
When you compose now, is it completely in the box, or did you actually pick up hardware and utilize some MIDI aspects?
No, it's completely in the box. Completely in the box. I've still got my guitars, 2 guitars to the side of me here, and I've got a bass guitar, so I still play guitar.
Do you use them to, like, you know, chuck out chords and say, oh, that's a good progression, let's throw that into a song? Or
no, interestingly, I do it the other way. So I can't play keyboard, but I'll sit there and I'll be like, right, I want to come up with some. I mean, I know basic music theory, and I know if it's right or wrong, and I know the notes on the keyboard, but I couldn't play it as such. I couldn't play a phrase. But with MIDI in a piano roll, you can play a chord and then you can trigger it and then you can play another one and it plays it afterwards. And there are things like Scalar 2 as well, whereby you can basically say, I want it in the key of F minor. I want to play in this particular variation or sevenths or ninths or whatever, and then you can just spit out some ideas for you. So I use that, and you can do the whole humanizing thing. But no, I mean, in short, I go the other way. So I kind of come up with. I was saying this on another podcast the other day. I think it's primarily bass led. I usually come up. I'm not a bass guitarist. I can play bass as a guitarist, but I usually come up with like a bass line first to underpin the whole sort of like theory and concept of the song, and then build the chords on top of that. Sometimes it starts with the chords. A song I was working on the other day did, and then right at the end is when I get the guitar. So I flesh it out, the composition, and then I'll get the guitar involved. It might be because it's a bit of a ball-like scent, going and grabbing it and tuning it, and then making sure it's all good. So no, it usually starts solely in the box, and then at some point I'll pick up the guitar if I feel it's needed. I play bass, but I usually outsource the bass. So I get a bassist friend of mine to come in and play it, and he's a massive Steve Harris fan, so he's all like with his bass playing, which doesn't always fit, but he knows what he's doing.
That's pretty cool.
Are you using Cubase, or what are you using?
I use Logic when I'm mixing. I was once upon a time a tools user when I was more recording, but now I don't. It's all post-production now, and it's all in the box. So I use Logic for everything bar mastering, and then I use Reaper when I'm doing mastering. You know what? I've used all the doors to some level, bar Cubase, and actually Studio One.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I know a lot that use Cubase.
Rank them. I want to hear what you think. Obviously, Logic is your favorite, but of all the other ones, what's the good, the bad, the ugly?
I think for me, I like Logic because it's kind of like a good all round. Would I track in Logic? If I had the option to use Pro Tools, I'd track in Pro Tools because I'd have to. It's been a while since I've done it, but I always found Pro Tools worked better for me when tracking.
What do you like about it that Logic wouldn't do for you? Or you just feel comfortable there? You know it's going to be there?
Yeah, at the time when I was doing it, I mean, that being said now, it would be easier for me to track in Logic because I haven't used Pro Tools for so long. But at the time, with key commands and everything, I just found the workflow for me was a lot easier in Tools.
Yeah.
If I remember rightly, it came down to when I wanted to drop in for takes and things like that. I just found it a lot easier in Pro Tools. And some of the routing capability and flexibilities as well with the routing. But Logic, I find for composition and like arrangement and songwriting the way I do, Logic just works really well for me. I find it's, and I like the MIDI aspect of it. And the recent update as well, it's got so many cool adaptations like the virtual drummer and the virtual bassist, which I haven't used yet. And some of the plugins as well in Logic are fantastic. Like Alchemy, the synth, I was noodling around with it yesterday, coming up with a sub bass. And I was like, man, I've been sleeping on this for too long. It's such a good synth. And same with the compressors in Logic as well.
I'm not going to fault you for sleeping on it. I've been using Cubase for a long time, and I just loaded up the 13 version, and it's got some new sounds in it. But
Are you lost yet?
you'll spend 2 months just doom scrolling through all the sounds.
I know.
Is this it? Is that the sound? No, okay. But they're all great. And so I don't fault you for it's too big to know what you already have under the hood.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But I've heard that with other Logic users where the reason they like it is they said it's as simple as I want it to be.
Yeah.
And meaning if I just want to fire up something real quick and get an idea out of my head, it'll do that. No problem. No questions asked. And if I want to go into more depth, it can do that. But I don't have to. I've never played around with it, but I tell you what, I feel like I need to at some point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I could quickly flesh out a track in Logic.
Well, other Mike, I will tell you, you got to be a Mac guy to do it. That's the only problem.
Yeah, that is true.
I will not be doing that.
Sorry.
No, so I'm not standing on any bias there. I just don't have a Mac, so unless they have an iPad version.
I think I want to say there is. There's an iPad version of GarageBand, which is like
Yes.
entry level version of Logic. So you get to grips with GarageBand, and then so actually, to be fair, some people just stick with GarageBand. I've had clients submit mixes on GarageBand. I'm like, actually,
Is Logic an Apple Inc. product?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. What was it before? It was, I mean, Logic, it wasn't Apple before.
That was like Logic. That was Logic 5 is when I believe it stopped being vendor agnostic. I think Logic 5 is when they were like, no, you got to have a Mac now.
Well, then it's been around a while because this guy we talked to, he's running a Intel-based Power PC. It's a Macintosh from the 90s.
Wow.
Or not a Macintosh, but it's a Apple Power PC, and he's running Logic on it. So,
wow,
kind of insane.
Yeah. Tell me when you got into like your history of in the box. What, was it always Logic, or was it GarageBand first, or like did you have an outboard sequencer, or was it a 4-track recorder? Like, what was the first thing?
If I'm going back to when I started recording any type of music, it was a dictation machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a tape in it, and I was playing guitar, and I was like, I want to get some ideas down. I want to put a backing track down. So I just had this tape machine crudely next to my amplifier, just recording, and then I was trying to play some lead guitar over it. So that was my first foray, and then from that, I was like, there must be something else. So what did I buy? I think it was Cakewalk. I think I
There
bought.
you go. Yeah.
And I bought that on a Hewlett Packard laptop. Didn't have an audio interface,
Right.
so I had a 1/4 inch going to an 1/8 inch jack for my guitar into the microphone input on my laptop.
That's right. That's right. And you're like, why does this sound terrible? Yeah.
Yeah. So there was that, and then
Mhm.
I probably didn't do anything for a while after that. I was like, oh, this isn't really working out. I'm just going to go back to playing guitar now.
Right.
And then that's when I then went into the studio. Before we did that, we were recording demo tracks using, I cannot remember the name of it, but it was a really basic Riffworks. That was it.
Hadn't heard of that.
I don't even know if you can get it now, but it was, we'd laid down tracks using Riffworks, and he had a Matt Sorum sample pack on it. So all of our demos from this album were Matt Sorum on drums, whilst various different tempos, and then you could turn a dial to get a bit more sort of like variation in his playing. Otherwise, it was just dum, tss, dum, tss, dum,
Yeah.
boom, 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 like that.
Oh, yeah.
Which worked perfectly for us. Then we went in the studio, and our drummer was just like Mike Portnoy was his influence, so he was all over the shop. So yeah, so then it went to that, and then when I did this evening course to then go on to do the degree and whatnot, that's when I started using Logic, and I think that was Logic 9. So that was in 2011, and then it's been in and out of my life ever since, basically.
You said that you do mostly post, production stuff where you're not tracking. So are you getting like a Pro Tools file, or are you like, look, don't even bother, Logic is it? Or do you do some like kind of just give me stems, or what are you doing if it's not your own stuff?
Yeah, so basically it would be only once have I had someone send me the Logic project, and that was because she used only Logic plugins. She was new to it. She'd only used Logic plugins. So I was like, that's fine. I can just open it and it'll be fine. Other than that, I'll be like, just send me the tracks. Just make sure they're all at 0. Whatever.
Okay.
Send me the tracks and do it that way, because everybody uses in the synth scene is Cubase, Fruity Loops, Ableton. Probably, I would say Cubase and Fruity Loops seem to be. I might be told different by others, but that seems to be what a lot of people use. And then Logic. I mean, on my podcast, all the tutorials I do are in Logic, but I kind of use the native plugins and then try and make it as vendor agnostic as possible by saying you could just take this and then use it in another DAW. The ideas and the concepts as such.
By the way, I really like your bite-sized kind of, 5-minute, very short, like, hey, did you need a kick drum sound? Let me show you how to get that kick drum sound, and then you just kind of go through, and it's nice.
Yeah, I also say I appreciate that in the sense of that's not enough for a full episode, so I'll hold off. It's like, no, you had 168 or something episodes on there. Some were 2 hours, some were 5 minutes, and I was like, that's perfect, exactly as long as they need to be. So, thank you. Keep doing that.
Thanks. It's admittedly, I when I first started, I didn't really know what the length I wanted them to be. So it would be, okay, I'll just let it go on and see what happens. And to be fair, I don't really, I cut a few bits out here and there, but the conversations that you hear are pretty much the full conversations. Occasionally something may drop out or something like that, or there is a bit of a gap. And I'm like, ooh, that's a bit too much. But more apart from that, when I'm interviewing or talking to people, apart from when there's more than one person, and then that's when you've got to go in and yeah, that can be a bit time consuming. But yeah, more often than not, it is the full conversation, which is quite cool. But I've shortened it now purely for my own sanity. So it makes it quicker for me to edit as well. Because I was kind of like, if I want to do weekly episodes, I cannot have them at 2 hours or an hour and a half because it just takes too long for me to edit, upload, because I do the video element of it as well to a degree.
Why are you laughing, Mike?
This feels familiar.
It's a long process, isn't it? Especially when there's more than one person when it comes to editing.
I mean, we do this for fun, so
Yeah.
it's not a full-time job. We had or maybe I did, but we talked about having a better cadence and this and that, and between finding time that the both of us and a guest can be available, and then the editing, which can be, and I'm not editing for content. I'm editing for just to make it high quality, and I add some B-roll and things like that. It just takes a while.
Yeah.
And so he's laughing because we've been doing this for about a year and a half from the first one we did to now, and this is episode the 13th one.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny that we're going, okay. But that also brings me to this question. I mean, is Inside the Mix, is this like your full-time thing, or you putting on a tie on Monday mornings and going somewhere else, or?
Oh, no. I operate from here. So in the truth be told, the podcast, because I got to wear a few different hats. So I do the music production, primarily mastering, to be honest with you. That's sort of like what I enjoy doing the most. But I will like mix other people's music if I feel I can do a service. And then I really only produce my own stuff. Occasionally I might work with someone, but I find most enjoyment doing my own stuff. And I think I'm kind of leaning in now to what I enjoy more. But then I also do e-learning content for sort of B2B, so business to business as well for consumers and whatnot. So it's all done from this studio that I'm in, this little studio. I've got a post-production studio, but there are sort of like different aspects of it that I do. So the podcast was really created all those years ago as a way of like, this is going down sort of like the business side of it. It was that like top of funnel, as they call it, element, which is whereby I can reach an audience, connect with an audience, they can see what I do, and then they listen, consume that content, and ultimately then they may wish to work with me. Great. If they don't, then they're just going to get some tips and tricks that hopefully they can use as part of this like advice buffet. But that's how it started. But now it's kind of like does it take up a fair chunk of my time? Probably not as much as it used to now with the advent of AI. I don't do any sponsorship with it either. So you can have adverts and whatnot. Occasionally, if I feel the advert is right, and for example, there was a gentleman who had a vocal coaching business, and I thought actually that might be quite good for my audience here in the UK. Maybe they want to reach out and have a vocal coach as part of their workflow, and maybe they want to upskill. So I was like, actually, yeah, we can stick that as an advert on there, and I charge for that. It's evergreen content for them. But apart from that, the podcast really was just a way of reaching an audience and showcasing what I do essentially. And then it's just taken on a sort of life of its own now. It's this beast that just keeps chugging along.
Right.
So many podcasts started kind of during pandemic days, but your first episode was February 2022. Was there any kind of correlation with that, or was it just the right time for you and what you were doing?
It was the right time for me. It was the right time for me. There wasn't, was that during a lockdown over here? It might have been.
I don't know.
It might have been the second lockdown in the UK.
I've tried to forget all that.
Yeah, it might have been. It might have been, but it just coincided. I was gonna do it anyway because I like talking, and it's weird like doing a podcast. Now I can sit here and knock out episodes, and I'm just talking to me like into a microphone, which is quite weird. I kind of look at the camera and I have a conversation with these fictitious people on the other side. So it's quite.
Well, that's why there's two of us, because neither one of us wants to look insane.
I often do.
Wait, is that why? Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's so good.
That's funny. Yeah. Okay. I know the answer is true, but true or false? You've been out and about and gotten an idea in your head and, hummed it, sang it, whistled it into your phone recorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes?
yeah, I've done
Okay.
that. I should probably go and look through what I have. It's a lot of. I remember this has more happened really when I was living in Cardiff. I remember waking up hungover a few times, and I'd have these ideas going around in my head.
What? Cardiff beer? Huh?
Yeah, well, exactly. I don't know if it was conducive being there and then like having a few beers and wake up in the morning and being inspired. Maybe it's because I heard something the night before, but I don't do it as much now, and I think that's probably because I'm always in an environment where there's like some musical equipment around me. When I was in Cardiff, it was different. I was there studying, and I had access to these great facilities, but they were sort of like I'd have to travel to get to them. Whereas I've always got it here now, so I guess I do it less than I did before. And there are so many great things. I downloaded what's called Splice, so it's a platform whereby you can get loops basically, and there are others. There's Loop Masters and XYZ, but I recently I was like, I'm working on these tunes, man. I'm finding that I need a bit of inspiration, so I often go there and just find loops. And what I tend to do is I'll then drag them into the project and then rip them apart in terms of right, okay, well, these are the notes that are being played. This is the sound they've used. Let's try and recreate that. So I don't exclusively use the loop. I just recreate it in the way I think it should sound for my project. But anyway, they've got an app now where you can download it, and then on the fly you can just randomly select samples and create a track stack for influence. And I was like, that's great. So when I'm away from my computer, I can just tempo key, drum beat, and then just scroll through with some ideas. Now, obviously, that's not going to help when I get a random idea in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought it was great. Bit of a tangent there, but I was just like, I love it. Just being
That's very cool.
Did they let you put in your own samples?
I don't know. I don't know if they do. I've got it here in front of me, to be fair. A bit of a tangent, but I don't think it does allow you to do that. It'd be good if it did.
That would be cool. It's like your own personal mod.
Mm-hmm.
Download samples. No, it doesn't look like you can. Maybe that would be something.
Not really for tracking.
Was Cardiff where the master's program was?
It was, yeah. So it was a place called the University of South Wales, and I was there for a year doing the master's degree.
I don't think over here they value music production as much, because I don't think you can get a master's over. I don't know. Am I wrong? Do we know?
A master's in what? The US production?
In music production, yeah, or production, audio production, yeah. I don't
know.
I haven't looked into it.
I could be wrong.
I don't know. It was good. It was good because I did it a bit later in life. So I was tail end of my 20s. So I still went out on the piss. I was going to swear that. I don't know if you swear on your podcast, but it came out of me.
Swear away.
Yeah. I still went out on the piss a lot and whatnot. And I had a year basically where I saved up money. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go all in and just do this masters and enjoy myself. And I had access to these great audio, I was going to say Audio Technica desks, Audient desks, SSL Duality desks.
Yeah, you did. Oh, wow. Okay.
This Gus Dudgeon desk, which was used by Elton John on some of his tracks, previously owned by Robbie Williams as well. So they had that, and it was great. They had this little plate on there. Now they didn't do it, and we didn't do it while we were there, but it was a plate specifically for cocaine. And I'm not saying that these artists did that. I'm not besmirching them, but there was a plate there, and it had an elephant next to it, and it was just there purely for cocaine. I was like,
yeah,
this is
cards used to have ashtrays on them. Didn't mean you smoked.
Exactly.
Mixing boards used to have cocaine plates on them.
Yep.
What was the one, Mike? Where were you that had the tape on the board and it says Please do not do cocaine on the mixing board.
I know. I remember. It's great.
Something like that.
What do you use to edit your podcast, your video editing, and what's that look like?
Yeah, sure. So again, I use Logic for editing the podcast. And
even the video editing?
No, I use Final Cut for that.
Okay. All
To be fair, like when it comes to the video, when it's an interview, I don't really edit the video. I'll top and tail it, but I'm just like, the audio is where my focus is, and the video, I upload the video to YouTube because I have it and it's there, and I'm thinking, well, I might as well use it. And I use a platform called Riverside, and it has, as all platforms now do, it is leaning into AI. So find a platform that doesn't, and I'd be surprised. And basically, this platform now, it will go through and it will attenuate or remove the ums and ahs. But I leave them in anyway because it's part of the conversation, and it does all that sort of stuff. So I let the platform do that for the video. But when I'm doing the tutorial ones, I use a platform called ScreenFlow to record it, and then I'll just tidy up the audio and the video in there, export it into Final Cut, and I've got a template. I just chuck it in basically, and it spits it out. But Logic is used for the editing of the audio. And I can edit a podcast episode now in, I would say, like a 45-minute episode. I could probably do in about 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's, that's 160 episodes in. I've been able to get it down to that. To begin with, it was not. It was much longer when I was doing episode 1.
That's impressive. Are you listening at 3 times the speed, or you just know that, this part was great, that part I'm going, and like you already know what you're doing?
Yeah, it's mainly that. I mean, if it's a tutorial episode, I would have already, as I go along, because I don't do it all in one stint. I don't do the whole 5, 10, 50 minutes, whatever it is. I won't do it all in one hit. I'll do chunks, and I'll like just top and tail it as I go. But when the audio is in Logic, it is pretty much just using the template. I'll put it in there, bit of EQ, bit of compression. I use the RX suite as well, so I use that to get rid of any noise, any sounds and clicks.
Yeah. Isotope is those guys, that's some magic. Their stuff is great.
100%. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a podcast. I upload it in MP3 anyway. When it goes up to the podcast aggregator, I use Buzzsprout. And I'm not too precious. I was in the beginning, and I was finding this is taking me too long. I've just got to, it's not a mix of a song that's then going to be mastered. It's a podcast. So there is a quality control element there, but it's certainly not as rigid as, say, a mix. It was in the beginning, and that was why it was taking me so long. I
used to be a little bit more, I guess, anal about our going through, but our stuff is like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. And you can't, that it's another path. And I come from old school production, so there's your first edit pass and your second edit pass and your final edit pass, and then you do an audio pass, and then you do a color pass, and then and it's like after a while that's why it takes us forever to do this. But also the tools that we're using are dipping their toes into the AI pond, and I'm sure
especially with the audio.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and even I think Isotope has a little AI, like noise reduction or something, or somebody does, and it is impressive. So, I think this will be a lot quicker for us in the future, but right now, because we're cutting this like multicam shows, so later we're going to split this up. And your little screen is going to become a camera, and my little screen is going to become a camera, and his little screen is going to become a camera. And then as we go through this, we're going to, make a decision who's on the screen the longest. And then, it's a long, complicated, and maybe we made it that way, but I feel like it was the only way to do it.
This could well make your life easier. Now, I'm not selling Riverside here by any stretch, but with the video, because I use this for interviews, it will automatically put the speaker on camera, and it does it for you. So that's another reason why I don't have to go through and edit, because I can select whether or not I want it to be picture in picture, or I want side by side, or I want like we are now where I'm talking and then if you, Mike or Mike, one of you talks, then you take over. So Riverside automatically decides for me, which is quite nice. And also it will go through and it would choose what it perceives to be the best sound bites for the episode as well. And it would create actual, now I don't use them because I use another platform for that utilizes AI, called opus.clip, I think, or something like that. But I recommend looking around because I had to do it. I had to go think, okay, I just need to make this quicker and I need to lean on something else to help me here. Because I was doing I was editing the video and then I was having to go through and create social media content as well, assets, and then create it and chop it myself. And I was like, oh man, this is too long. But there are tools out there and I think Riverside might be one to have a look at because I think it could well save you a bit of time.
Yeah, I'm very, very curious in checking that out.
I want to check it out too, but I will say that we may be little gluttons for punishment just because we came from the video world a long time ago and learned on Avid and that kind of stuff. So we may be kind of like, I like to get my hands dirty.
I'll check it out, but what I would really love is for some plugin in DaVinci that would look at all the raw footage and how I edited it across multiple episodes, and then takes a new episode raw footage and says, I think I've edited it the way you would have, and I can go clean it up. That's what I would love.
You want an AI assistant editor. That's what you want.
I want to come in and be like, no, this is wrong, clean that up, and output it. Have a nice day.
Give me some coffee.
Yeah, and I'm going to lunch.
I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a thing because with generative AI now, with like ChatGPT 4, Gemini, whatever it is you use, and then if you pay, I don't know if you get it with the free version, but obviously with the paid version, you can set it so it will then start to spit out content in your particular style, in your phrasing, and the way you communicate. So I think it's only a matter of time before you can then put content into these platforms, and then they think, okay, well, based on what you've done there, I'm then this generative AI is just like you mentioned there, it's just going to say, well, I'm going to edit this like the way you've done it previously, which kind of makes perfect sense. Like I cannot imagine that won't exist at some point because
I think it will.
I agree. I mean, 2 years ago, it would have just seemed fantastic. And you'd be like, you know how many times you have to do that? And I'm going, do you know how many iterations are in these models? Millions, billions. And so if I sat somebody down and taught, I could teach them to edit just like me, and it wouldn't take a million shows to do that.
Yeah.
It may take 20 or even less. So still to mimic my style or no. And we've all done that in occupations before. I would write official letters for government officials sometimes. And I'm going, I know how that person would say this.
Yeah.
And so I would write it that way, not in my style. And it's funny. It's like, and they look at it, they're like, oh, that's perfect. Thanks. But that's a similar vein. It'll pick up the nuances of what you're trying to do, and you're going, like, okay, that's cool. But definitely I want to check out Riverside and just see what's going on there.
I would. I don't know if they do like a trial. They might do a trial or something like that. I pay the yearly membership, but I'll be using it now for a couple of years. To begin with, it was good, but the video I had sync issues with audio and video, but it's come on like leaps and bounds now. It's the like I said, the AI capabilities of it are, so it will come up with like the script, they will transcribe it for you as well, and it will do all that sort of stuff. And there's other bits and pieces that it will do, but I don't use because I don't need it essentially. But yeah.
Now, are all your podcast episodes have a video component? Because when I did the first one, I just found it on Spotify and I listened to it because I didn't see a video, and so Mike clearly got some other one.
To begin with, it's all audio. It's all audio. Like I know you can upload videos to Spotify, but I was just like, man,
another headache.
Yeah. I thought about it and I was like, nah, man. But my main listenership is through Apple Podcasts, so it wouldn't make sense for me to do it anyway. I get Spotify downloads, but Apple is the big one. But on YouTube, I think it's episode 70 and beyond is when I started putting them on YouTube, and that's where there are some that don't have videos because I've had occasionally I get guests and they're like, I'd rather not have video, and I was like, that's cool, man. We'll just do audio because that's the main part of it, and then I just use like the thumbnail But yeah, but on YouTube you can consume it all. You can watch it all, the tutorials and stuff, and all the interviews on there. And they're on there weekly, so they're usually Tuesday afternoon. The episodes drop Tuesday morning, and then the videos come out Tuesday afternoon.
Like, what day is it?
Who is your favorite person to interview?
Oh, good question. Who's my favorite person to interview? Yeah, I would say my favorite interview was probably when I interviewed a mix engineer called Dom Morley, and that was late 2023. No, that was last year. Late 2022, I think it was. Wow. And he's a very well-known and well-established mix engineer, and he's worked with big artists, Adele, Sting, all these huge artists. And for me, I just had a really great conversation with him because he was sort of like this. It was kind of like a knowledge seeker episode where I just wanted to absorb enough information from him,
Right.
experience, because it was kind of like the next step up for me. And I was thinking, actually, it was quite daunting as well, knowing that I'm going to be chatting to someone and asking them the sometimes technical-ish. I don't really deep dive too much into technical, because I think that might, I don't know, I like to keep it quite high level when I'm doing demonstrations and stuff like that, so it's accessible to all. But that for me was one of the most enjoyable ones, because coming away from it, I was like, actually, I felt quite comfortable chatting and interviewing accomplished engineers, mix engineers, mastering engineers, and I've done a few now. This year, for example, I've chatted with Bobby Osinski, who was a massive influence on me. I've got his book behind me when it comes to mixing. I chatted with Jonathan Weiner as well. So he's at Berkeley, and you can find him on all. There's loads of isotope stuff with him. He's a mastering engineer, and he worked a lot with the isotope development, the dev team there. So that was quite a big one. But yeah, the most enjoyable one was probably that Don Morley one, because I felt I got most out of that, knowing that I could then go on and chat. I felt comfortable then chatting with other engineers, and also it was the catalyst for the warm introductions to others. So I had then Mike Exeter, who's worked with Black Sabbath notably, and Adrian Hall, who mixed one of my favorite live shows ever, which was Depeche Mode live in Berlin, which is like, he mixed that, and I was just like, oh man, I can't wait to chat to this guy. So that was cool. Fun ones, other fun ones, but I've chatted to artists. Sunglasses Kid was a good one. That was always, so he's quite big on social media now with his synth POVs, they call them, point of views. So that was quite cool. That was a slightly different episode, a bit more of a that one. Yeah, the Don Morley one probably would be the standout one.
I think I can identify with the it's a cool feeling to have been, you do this, and then you meet somebody who, is like somebody you've looked up to, and you think, man, I mean, they really know what they're doing. And then you start to talk to them, and they'll just the banter back and forth. You're like, wait a second, I know what I'm doing also. Like this conversation. This is so cool that we're like on the same level in some ways.
A little bit of knowledge validation there.
Yeah. And recently for me, I got to do a Zoom call, which is, not an interview. Maybe we should turn it into an interview. A guy from, not a guy, I'm going to call him the guy from Dolby. I think his name is Brian Pennington. Man, if I screwed that up, I'm going to kick myself. But he tunes all of the movie theaters that are Atmos.
Yeah.
And surround sound. And so he goes in with special microphones and puts them in the movie theater and basically makes sure that they are all exactly spec. And so here I've done this for the University of Texas, and just like got to talk to him, and we're just back and forth. And I'm like, wait a second, I do that too. And he's like, yeah, that's what I do. And I talked to the other guys at Dolby, and they don't do that. And I'm like, well, they're insane. And like, it was just cool to see that the guy, and we kind of go through the same. In fact, how we were talking about, you try something new for a show. I am using this microphone, which is the reference microphone that you're supposed to use for tuning rooms, and probably not for voice.
I was kind of wondering what you're doing, because every show you've got a different mic.
Well, that's sort of my shtick is I'm trying to see if you notice. Anyway, yes, I think it's super awesome that you got to have an enjoyable interview with somebody you look up to.
Going back to what you said there, it's kind of like knowledge validation. And you think
Yeah.
like, I do kind of know something. Um, yeah, after all this time, something's sunk in.
Yeah, when you can actually have a conversation with somebody and it's not just kind of a pissing contest, one up, this
Oh
and
yeah.
that. You're actually talking about something and going, yeah, but have you ever noticed if you look at this frequency range on those and they're like, it goes up to 5 dB, and you're like, exactly, it's out of, or whatever.
I've been
You're
lucky
nerding out
not
to.
to have like those pissing contest ones. I think because I'm quite good at curating guests. I think, but no, I don't know. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced it with the conversations you've had on podcasts or maybe other platforms as well. But I think I get it more when it's kind of like you're in groups of artists and they're saying, oh, I've done X, Y, Z, or I use this, why don't you use that? Or I don't know.
Truth. Yeah.
Elitist. I think you get that sometimes, but
Not with guests. No, not that I remember. Everybody's usually over humble.
Yes, I found that. I think that's another thing as well. Yeah, I find that with particularly with the sort of the more higher profile ones as well, incredibly humble, which is
Some of their success may have been the right place, right time, and they're not gonna say, "Oh, I've got magic dust in my pocket," and I'll never tell you what it does or where I got it. So
yeah,
Right.
they got it off that plate on that mixer in Cardiff.
yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that though about like I'm not going to share my secrets because it counter to that. I remember when I first started, wanted to get some like work experience in studios, and there was one down here. I won't name it, in the southwest, and I was kind of like reaching out to mastering engineers, like, do you mind if I just pop in and like see what it is you're doing? And then I thankfully one in Cardiff, for example, said yes, and another one down here said yes as well. But some of them are just like, why would I show you what I do? You're my competition. I'm like, come on, man. You're here. You're like right at the top and like working with these artists. And I haven't even started. It's like, and I think that might have been another reason that spurred me on to do the podcast because I wanted to just be a go-giver. I'd be like, no, like if anybody asks me questions, I'm never going to turn them down. I'm always going to be like, no, I've got the time of day. It might take a few moments for me to get back to you, but I will help. And that spurred me on a bit then because that really, I thought, God, really? Come on, man.
And the truth is, you can tell everybody how to do everything, and if they don't have the talent and drive to do that, they're not going to do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're different playing fields as well, to be honest.
We had the guy I used to write music with, and I was a little uncomfortable at first just because of just me. But he's like, hey, this guy is interested in what we're doing. He just wants to come over and sit in a chair and watch you. And I'm going, what? That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And I was initially just very reluctant. And, and then 5 years later, and this guy and I are really good friends. So, but at the time I couldn't understand the motivation. And I was a little, I don't want to say secretive, but I was kind of like, that's going to be an annoyance to my creative process.
Yeah.
But after a while, then he's asking good questions, and then asking questions which spur my brain into a mode which helps my creativity and be like, you know what, that is a good question. Why am I doing it this way? I should be using this thing over here. Thanks. And he's gaining knowledge and things like that. So,
And that I think that's the counter, right? To we'll call them the gatekeepers of knowledge, right? And you went and you asked these guys for help, and they said, piss off. And so the downside to that is that when they are not helping other people learn, then they're not going through the exercise again with these people who are learning, right? Just like what Nimix was saying, is it challenged him, and so these people who told you to piss off, they missed out on actually having to rethink, well, why do you do it that way? Like, okay, why are you using that microphone? Okay, well, which cutting their nose off despite the face, like I kind of think they deserve it. They should be cooler.
yeah, once a mentor-mentee relationship is established, it's mutually beneficial. It
Yeah.
goes both ways. I've learned so much by teaching people stuff.
Yeah.
And when I first had that realization, it blew my mind. Because I think that's what my reluctance was I felt it was a one-way street, and I wasn't going to get anything out of it. Like, why am I going to waste my time when I could be doing other stuff? And now clearly I think about that differently, but that's pretty neat. And I'm reminded of the first time I went to I was a professional video editor. I'd never used Avid, and I showed up at an Avid house. And so I made a deal with my boss. I was like, don't give me any assignments for a week, but find your best editor and let me shadow them for 5 days. And the editor was amazing, told me what was going on, this and that. And after that, I just took off. I was good. So it was.
Those people don't come along. Like, you were curious, and you came up and you asked for help. Like, there aren't people like you all over the place. It's very few and far between, and they're really good relationships to hold on to. I think they're some of the most interesting friends that I still have. I've mentored, and there's just not very many of them.
No, I agree. I think going back to what Mike Nimick said about like how you can, it reinforces your own understanding. I think coming from the teaching background that I have as well, once being able to articulate and present something, an idea or a concept, I think that does help show understanding and also cement understanding. It really does help me. I find if I learn something new, for me to fully understand it, the podcast really helps because I'm thinking, okay, well, I've just learned this. If I needed to learn it, I'm not saying that I'm the be all and end all, but there's probably somebody out there who's also interested in it. So I'll create an episode on it. And that just really does help cement my understanding. Also going down to the mentor thing as well. So I do coaching as well in like music, in mixing. And I frequently talk to individuals and then they'll say, I've got this problem. And I don't necessarily know the answer straight away. But it's that fact finding. It's a situation for me whereby I'm going to learn something new that I may not, as you mentioned just now, I may not have entertained that idea before because it's not part of the projects that I usually work on. But because this individual's saying I've got this problem, I'm learning something new as well. So you definitely get that back and forth, which it needs to be embraced.
Yeah, and to beat this horse to death, my wife is was a second grade teacher for many years, and so I've helped her a lot. And one of the things she's taught me is, well, here's how we learn. I'm the teacher, so I'll do it. That's the first iteration, and then me and the student will do it, and that's the second iteration, and then they will do it by themselves as the third one. So it's I do, we do, you do, and it seems to be like that's kind of the cementing of it was the I do, and then now we do, and then you do.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Mark, you just said something which made me think. You're talking about solving problems. Do you approach mixing and mastering as a problem solving session?
No, I don't think I do, to be fair. It's a tricky one, that, isn't it? Because I'm thinking if you do approach it with a problem solving mindset, you're going to be looking for problems, which I guess you kind of are in a way, because you listen to mastering's, it's a different way of listening. You're listening to everything as a whole, because I do it in separate phases and I do it in a separate DAW because of the workflow and Reaper and whatnot. But am I problem solving? I don't see myself as problem solving. No, I think I'm trying to bring out the best. You've got that sort of like clean car, and then I'm just adding that polish to it to make it really shine. And that's the way I see it, rather than trying to find problems with the mix that's been sent across.
Got it. Yeah, and I wasn't asking as kind of a gotcha. I was just kind of, it made me have the spin like, am I looking at this in a positive thing? Like, or am I looking at this as a negative?
It's weird. I think with mixing as well, I see it from a possibilities point of view. Okay, so what can I do with this? Where can this go? What can we do with this? If it's my own productions, then it's open-ended. I'm like, okay, well, what can I chuck in there? Rather than occasionally, I think maybe when I'm listening to mix revisions, there might be an element of okay, well, I'm now going to listen to see if there are any problems. Is there any boominess in the low end? Is the bass and the kick drum, are they gelling together well enough, or are they conflicting? Is that vocal coming through enough compared to the synths and the snares and everything else that's going on in there? Is the high end? Is it open? Is it spacious? Then maybe when I'm listening to mix iterations, maybe then I'm looking for problems.
Okay. But then in that regard, it sounds like you are using the mixing as a creative process.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Up until that point of whereby I'm doing sort of mix reviews, it's definitely a creative process. I'm not necessarily problem solving then. But I think when it gets to maybe with the mix iterations, there is an element of problem solving. Again, though, I suppose you could say that, okay, well, how could I make this slightly better? But then to do that, you need to then know where the problems are.
And so, as far as mixing is concerned, like how creative do you allow yourself to get? And for instance, does somebody say, "Here it is right now," and you listen to it, and you're like, "Okay, there's the rough mix," and they don't want to deviate too much with it, or like something that would be kind of crazy to me. I mean, to try, but sometimes it works. I don't know if you're familiar with "The End of the World as We Know It" by REM, but there's a part in the song where they just pull out the drums. The drums just disappear, and then and then they come right back in, and like even though the drums may have been there the whole time, right? Maybe it wasn't scored that way. So are you letting yourself be that kind of free where you're like, well, we're just going to completely remove these things and maybe add something completely different? Or are you like, let's stay true to the song and just tweak?
For me, when it comes to mixing, I would stay true to the artist's vision. If they've sent across the tracks, and I'll always ask for their rough mix, because that gives me an indication of where they like things to sit to an extent. I see that as more of sort of the production, as in the creative side of production. So unless they specifically said to me, okay, what do you think, how could we improve this particular section in terms, maybe from an arrangement perspective, then I might say, okay, well, maybe you could drop that layer there. Maybe you need a bit more light, night and day, a bit dark and light and shade in there as well. Drop some bits out to then have further impact when that other section comes in. Have you thought about maybe making that slight, when you got macro dynamics? To be fair, yes, I play around with macro dynamics, particularly in mastering, so that when it comes to the chorus, it just hits a bit harder, whether that's like a 0.5 dB, because it's very minute changes there. But when it comes to mixing, I find I'll stay true to their vision. I don't want to change it too much because they've already got an idea, unless we've had a conversation and they've said, actually, we might want you to have some creative input as well. I'm quite black or white. I'm kind of like, okay, if I'm going to mix this, I'm going to mix it, and I'm going to do it as a mix engineer. I'm not going to start moving your arrangement around. There are creative things I can do with regards to like the different sections and how we process the drums and the guitars and the bass, the synths, the vocals, and the different techniques I can use. But no, I think from the arrangement side of things, I would say, unless they specifically ask, I'd probably say, I'm going to stay true to your vision.
To get really into the weeds here, so let's say I hire you as a mastering engineer, and I've mixed it. I love the mix. I just want you to polish it. And for me to be your best client, what did you want from me? You want 24-bit or 32-bit float, 96 kilohertz? Like, what are you looking for, like file format wise?
Yeah, I want your mix sent to me stereo interleaved at the project settings that you have used.
Okay.
I don't want any down sampling or anything like that.
No down sampling or up sampling. You want it at what you had. Okay, that's purist kind of thing. Okay, I gotcha.
24-bit. I want it at 48 kilohertz, 24-bit. Then when I do the mastering, I'll send you different variations. I'll send you a 16-bit
44.1,
44.1, 24-bit 44.1. I'll send you a version at the original product setting. So if it is 48, 24, I'll send you that. Mastering for iTunes as well if you want it, send you that, and obviously the MP3. So you get all those file formats basically.
Got it.
Ultimately, I want it at the your project settings. I don't want you to because that's going to, if you do any downsampling there, that's an iteration of downsampling. Then when it comes to mastering, there's going to be another iteration.
Yeah.
So that they're better, I find.
Okay.
Ultimately, there is potential that there could be some anomalies or artifacts in there, but I think doing it the way I've described just removes any potential for any hiccups with regards to that conversion.
Yeah,
process.
that's a pretty smart way to do it. Yeah.
You had mentioned having a different setup for your mix sessions versus the mastering. Can you talk about those? What you're using?
Yeah, so I use Reaper for mastering, and the reason I use Reaper many moons ago, probably over 10 years ago now, I spent some time in a mastering studio in Glamorgan, just outside of Cardiff, and he used Reaper, and I really liked the workflow and footprint of it as well. And I watched his workflow in it. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use Reaper now because what was the go-to? I can't remember what the name of the industry is. It Wave Labs? It might be Wave Labs. The industry, kind of like Pro Tools, is seen as like the industry standard a lot for studios, which it is. Others might say different, but I think for the most part it is. If you go into a professional studio, you're probably going to be looking at a Pro Tools rack.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's Wave Labs. But yeah, I use Reaper because I like the workflow in it. I'm not an expert with Reaper because I know what I need to get the job done, essentially. And there's something for me psychologically as well, being in a different DAW, in a different application. It kind of like, it changes my mindset for me because I'm so used to being in Logic in that creative flow of songwriting, composition, recording, mixing. And then when I go into Reaper, there's something psychologically, okay, this is mastering now. I'm changing my perspective. And then I'm going to move into mastering. So yeah, I use Reaper for that. And I think it's a great platform. It does have a quite steep learning curve. But being open source, it's regularly updated. There's some cool stuff. And it's got quite a nice UI as well, to be fair. It's quite nice.
I bet Mark Matthews has some tutorials out there on that.
On
I bet
Reaper,
he
I've
does.
got one or two. I got lots. Maybe I should do some more Reaper, to be fair. There is one
There you
guy. What's his name? There's a guy with a YouTube channel, and he is an absolute boss when it comes to Reaper tutorials, and I can't remember his name, which doesn't help anyone. But he does exist.
He's out there.
There's one feature in Reaper which I think is absolutely fantastic, and it is the ability, if you have a plugin, there is a native button in Reaper whereby you can toggle it and you can just hear the processed audio. So, for example, if you were to use a preamp emulation and you just want to hear the color, or you've got an 1176 and you're just running it through that without actually any compression, you just want to hear the color and what it's doing, you can toggle this on a Reaper and you can just hear that processed audio, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, the only other place I've ever seen that was old noise reduction plugins where they were like, let me show you what we're removing. And
There are some plugins now, like Isotope with the DS. I know you can do it with a number of plugins now where you can go in, but they are plugin specific. So it'd have to be a feature in that plugin. Whereas with Reaper,
it's
really
native.
Yeah, it's native. So you can just, any plugin, flick that on and you can hear the actual processed audio, the effect it's having on the, which is great. If you're not familiar with the sound of a plugin, like you get a tape emulation,
Right.
hear what that tape emulation sounds like. You can just, in Reaper, you can just hear what it sounds like, which is great.
Oh, well, all right. You just, I was never going to try it before,
Oh, there you go.
and
you go.
and that did it. Thanks
Yeah.
for selling me on a whole new thing.
Just so I'm clear, like I have WaveLab and there's plugins there. I can always bypass the plugin.
It's not that.
You're talking about the third option where instead of dry and wet, what was put on it to make it wet.
Yeah, essentially that. Yeah, it's removing, it's attenuating the original audio, and you're only hearing the affected audio, I guess you'd call it. So, yeah, you're only hearing the audio with the process. It's really weird, hard to how the best way to describe it.
Yeah, no, I've got it, but I think that is an amazing creative tool because you can listen to just kind of the decorative parts and tweak those without having to see what's going on. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really cool. I think your plugin doctor might do something similar, but again, that's another plugin. They might
Now,
not.
did
I
you ever get into Reason at all,
I did,
or
yeah.
Rebirth or any of that?
Reason 5. This was pre third-party plugins I used,
Okay,
and I remember I really liked Thor, the
that
synth.
synth. Yeah,
I thought Reason was really cool. I probably moved away from it because once I got over the whole, you can flip it around and see the patch and move stuff around. I was like, actually, I want a bit more. I want to use third-party plugins and see what's out there. And now I use less third-party plugins, ironically. But then I know it's opened up now, so you can use third-party plugins and stuff in Reason. I liked Reason. I thought Reason was really cool. I know is it the Prodigy? The Prodigy? Liam
yeah,
Howlett? I think
yeah.
he did. And like,
Well, I don't know what they're using now, but
yeah, I mean, he's done all right for himself, to be fair.
you think? That's funny. My friend Brian, he's using Cubase 13, and there's a lot of virtual instruments with that ship with that, or you can get through Steinberg. But he also, because he was using Reason for a really long time, he just uses he can use those Reason instruments natively in Cubase 13,
Oh, yeah. So you
and
can,
he's loving it.
yeah, I think it was called Rewire. I remember doing that. I'd
Yep.
rewire in Logic 9 and then use Reason. I haven't done it in so long. I imagine it's still a thing. But
Yeah, because he'll have little, sound palette sessions, and he'll go and tweak knobs and Reason on those instruments and make his palette of sounds, and then save them, and then never have to open it again with Rewire. He just pulls up Cubase and calls it up like a VST.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So very cool. And okay, so Reaper is for mastering, and mixing you would just do in Logic,
Yep.
or do you have clients come to you with songs and they want to do mixing, and what do you do? Pull in like audio stems into Logic, or
So I use tracks. Yeah. So
okay,
that's me tracks. And then as long as I always stipulate they need to be at 0. So that way I can pull them in and they're all at 0 in terms of time. So they're time. The worst is when you don't have that, and then I'm just like, I send it straight back. I'm like, I am not going through this.
you're like
No,
you're like somebody clap on all microphones in sync at the beginning or something. You know?
And importantly, always get them to send you a scratch track as well, so you can double check.
this is what it's supposed to sound like. Yeah.
Then I'm like, you're missing like 3. More often than not, there's something missing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a client. I reach out to you over email, Instagram, something like that, saying, "Hey, I got an album I want you to mix," and you're like, "Great, send me the following files." And how often is it, track by track? You're like, "Hey, here's this one," or is it a full deal or whatever they're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, usually when that happens, when someone reaches out, to begin with, I'll say, right, let's jump on a call and let's hash it out and see if we're a good fit. I think that's really, really important, rather than just saying, let's do it. Because, I've had a couple this year where I've turned around and been like, actually, we're probably not the right fit for each other, but I can signpost you to someone else, basically. Because I know what I like and I know what I like doing, which, and then if I think I would be doing them a disservice, then that's the good thing about those conversations. We can have that chat and they can ask questions as well. But ultimately, then when they want to go forward with the project, if it is multiple tracks, what I generally do is I'll do sort of one mix before I mix anything else, and get them to give the okay and say, okay, well, this is what we've done so far. Is this in the right ballpark? Are we moving in the right direction? Because what I wouldn't want to do is then mix 8 tracks and then turn around and be, Mark, you're way off. And then having to go back and go through it. It's the same with mastering as well, where actually, is it? I say it's different with mastering. What I generally do with mastering is I'll get them to send me the tracks before so I can listen and give them some advice. Maybe something like, this, you've got a bit of, there's the low end here. There's a bit too much going on. It's affecting the crest factor, or you've got some snares here, which you've got these they're peaking a lot. So that's going to impact your potential headroom. Maybe you want to go try and move those around. So that's a bit different when it comes to mastering. But with mixing, I will send them a file, a mix, and say, is this in the right ballpark? And then use that as a gauge to then go forward. And ideally, they'd send me all the tracks ready to go. But I did have one a few years ago, and he'd send me a track every sort of like 6 weeks. And that was, for me, I was just like, I am never doing that again, purely on the basis of your time, your tastes, and the way you do things do change over time as an artist. So by the time we got to the 10th track, it was starting to sound different to the first. And obviously they're going to their different songs, but in terms of the direction he was going, I'm thinking I need to get some correlation across these songs so they sound like they're all part of the same artistic body. And the way this is working right now is not going to be conducive to that. So yeah, where possible is to get them all the songs at the same time, get that initial approval, then go through. I'll send, every time I do a mix, I'll send it across, even if I do like a sub mix where maybe it's just the bass and the vocals, and just say, okay, this is, or the drums and the vocals, this is the drum and the vocal, what I've worked on so far, what do you think? And then carry on, and if I think it's worth sending it across. But no, I mean, I waffled a bit there, but that was a learning point when that guy sent me a song every sort of 6 weeks. That was never again am I doing that.
No, that makes sense from a creative standpoint. I can see how that can, we all know that it evolves, and you don't take a song from 3 years ago and put it on the album from today. It's not gonna fit. It's not gonna be in the same family.
So I have a question. If you were to have an album or a set of albums that you wish you had mixed, like the thing that it mixed and mastered, sort of produced all together, like what are you albums that are out there right now, maybe that inspired you from when you were way young or whatever, you wish your name was on them, or you want yours to sound very much like them? What albums, songs are those?
Yeah, I think if I was on a podcast last week and I was asked a similar question, and it was to do with if you could work with any or have any guest, and this sort of segues into that a bit. And there's one album that I would have liked to have been part of.
There you go.
And that would have been I would have liked to have worked with Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson and Bad.
Oh, okay, all right.
That album is like, the production on that album, for me, the bass on that album and the songwriting is just next level. And when I'm writing my own stuff, the way that they all arrange the way that they arrange the bass, and in particular with the synth stuff I do now, I'm quite heavily influenced by their bass arrangement and what they did on that album. So that would be one. I think for drums, I like hard hitting drums. I like drums. I like snares to like punch. And I think Metallica Black Album, the snare on that, I mean,
the toms and the kick, they're not bad either.
They hit when they come in, bump, 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 bang, and you're just like,
they're like cannons.
They hit hard. What is the song? I can hear it in my head. It's got like the sitar at the beginning. Wherever I may roam, when that comes in, dun, 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 and you're just like, wow, that is like, Bob Rock was onto something then when he was working with them. So that's another album. I think modern production. Who do I use most in references? I mean, I do like, from the synth realm, I do like the Midnight. I like their production. I think they're really good. Really good sounds and arrangements they've got going on in there. I think they're really, really good. From a modern perspective, I'm thinking of pop music now. I do keep my ear to the ground with pop music, so I know what's going on.
Sure.
What people are doing. I say that, and I can't think of any modern pop music.
I don't know about modern pop music, but for synthesizer stuff, it would be really old stuff. I would love to have been part of, like Phil Collins' No Jacket Required or something like that. Like that would have been a good time for me.
Was that the one where they screwed up the gate thing and discovered the sound?
It may have been. I just think the album sounds amazing.
Okay.
I think for synth, well, like if you want to go,
Stephen Hague, that kind of mid 80s, worked with everybody, OMD, Pet Shop Boys, New Order. I don't know if they did Depeche Mode stuff.
Yeah. The beauty of those records I find as well, like when I listen to Depeche Mode, is the simplicity. When you listen to like the drums and just the arrangement and the synths and the layers they use. And I hear this a lot. And I've been like slap on the wrist. I do this in my own productions. And because we're working in the box and you can have unlimited tracks, you're only limited by your processing power essentially. And now I've got a Mac Studio. I'm like, I do less now, incidentally, now that I've got it. But I just find their mixes and productions are just so open and spacious and sound so good that
Yes.
now sometimes I find there's too much. And I think like I mentioned this a lot on my own podcast, which is like less is more. I find sometimes with modern production where you've got all these elements that you can throw in there, but sometimes maybe just strip it back. Bass, drums, vocal, synth, guitar, and just lean on that for a bit rather than just throw the kitchen sink at it. But then
I don't know if that was a necessity thing because it, like Depeche Mode was trying to be a regular band, but just using synthesizers where you have a bass player and a lead and a rhythm and drums and stuff like that. So maybe that lent to that, but that airiness is exactly that. Because I'm still enthralled today. I won't listen to something for a long time, and it comes up, and I'm going, "This is so stupid, and it's so amazing."
yeah. It's brilliant, isn't it? I was listening to what's that Depeche Mode song earlier, Best Friend, and I just walked away, and my fiance came back, and I was talking to her, and then I was just singing it, just randomly, like, and you just like these songs just stand the test of time, man. Like I could just hear half the song, and then it's just immediately in my head. So yeah, if that amazing.
Were you ever into Underworld at all?
Well, I listened to a bit. Did I say a bit? That was like the 90s, wasn't it? Underworld.
Yeah, like Train Spotting era.
Yeah. Born. Did they do Born Slippy?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably the only song I could name of theirs, to be fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I really like their production. They're a little all over the map, and they keep an evolving sound, but they're just, I don't know, it's a well that I keep going to, and I'm going, yeah, this is the same, but it's so good.
Yeah.
As far as who are you now when you put out music? It's not Mark Matthews. What's your band?
No, that is it.
Is it?
It
Okay.
is. Yeah, I couldn't think of a name, so I just went with my own. I was I had
Unicorn Flame. I mean, that's low hanging fruit, dude.
I had a list of names, and every time I thought, "Oh, that's a banging idea," I'd then go on Spotify and be like, "Oh, fuck, somebody else has got it." Like, and
Yeah.
in the end, I was like, "I just want to release some stuff, man." So I went with my own name, and I think
Nice.
when I was originally doing it, and I say do it originally when I'm doing it now, it was kind of like, this is what I can do. I wasn't creating music to like make it big or anything like that. If people liked it, then great. I've got a huge following in like Eastern Europe, which is quite weird, on YouTube. So somewhere it obviously piqued their interest with some Italo disco remix that somebody did of my song. But yeah, and it was kind of just a way of saying, okay, this is what I do. This is a way of building my sort of production portfolio. But yeah, it's all under my own name. I toy every now and again. I think to myself, maybe I'll start releasing under like an artist name, and I might do that. But I'm going to release a few. I haven't released anything since sort of like December. So once I start getting that cadence of releases going again, and then I'm still figuring out the exact direction I want to go in. I've sort of got an idea now what it entails based off what I released last year. And maybe I will come up with a name, or I'll probably just be lazy and stick with my own. To be fair, I'm quite lucky that it's Eminem and it's got a C for Mark rather than a K, so it kind of looks nice when written down.
Yeah, it's unique. What so would you play shows?
You know what? I really miss playing live. I did a lot of that when I was in the metal band, and I'd love to. But with my sort of what I do at the moment, I say I wouldn't have time. I mean, I could make time. I'd have to find someone. The hardest part for me would be finding a singer locally. They probably exist. They probably do exist. But most of my stuff is primarily female vocals. So there's plenty. I guess there's plenty of female vocalists.
Craigslist.
They don't, yeah, whether they want to work with me, that's the thing. But I would
Post a
like,
bill at the local uni.
yeah. I actually I had this conversation with someone the other day, and because I guess I primarily work with people across the globe to an extent. I hadn't really properly reached out into my local area, and it's something that I'm working on more now. So hopefully that will then result in more me working with local artists, which would be quite nice. I do the coaching with local people, and I do some mastering for local people, but it'd be nice to work with some local artists. So it's something I'm going to pursue go forward. All the vocalists that have been on my stuff so far have been from, Christ, one was Argentina, in the States, New Zealand. So they've been all over the shop. What doing the uni? Maybe I should. Yeah, it probably makes
They
sense.
all want a demo tape, and you want a free vocalist. So
That's quite true. You know what? I don't know why. I used to work in a college as well as a lecturer, and why I never thought. I just reached out to like students. Oh, I don't know. There we go.
probably because you worked there at the time.
Well, yeah. That's. I probably wouldn't want to see him in my spare time as well. To be honest with you, I'm actually going to do that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Reach
There
out.
you go.
I
So
did
that's the next step for you. Okay. All right.
All right. I want to make sure because you've got the podcast,
Yeah.
which is available in multiple locations. Wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and then you got the Mark Matthews music. Can I find that on Apple Music and Spotify and everywhere?
Yeah. So if you just search my name, Mark Matthews, on any platform, you'll find it. So yeah, Spotify, Tidal, Deezer, if that's still a thing. Apple Music, YouTube Music, you'll find it all there as well. Bandcamp,
Got it.
Okay.
SoundCloud, but I generally put demos on SoundCloud and get feedback from people.
Yeah, SoundCloud's a different culture. I love it, but it's where like, hey, I just harmonized my cat having sex with the neighbor's cat. What do you think?
Yeah, some foxes going at it.
There's some cool melodies in there. I'll put those and make a song someday.
Yeah. So yeah, you'll find that there. And then my main website is synthmusicmastering.com. And then you can find out basically everything I do. You can find the podcast there as well, to be fair. It's on there as well.
And of all of your songs that you have, your own songs that you've recorded, which do you have one that you still like, that you still like come back to, and you're like, oh, this is my banger,
Yeah, I think there are two phases of life, musical life for me. So there are two. So the first one was when I was in the metal band. The metal band was called Engraved Disillusion. I don't know what it meant. No one ever did. And we released an album called Embers of Existence. And there's a track on there called As Life Fades. And we used to start sets with that, and we'd have the Terminator theme. And then it was so good. There's videos you can find on YouTube of it. And then it would lead into this song, and it was perfect. So from that era, it would be a song called As Life Fades, Engraved Disillusion, which is such a good opening for a metal band, for a song, for a gig. And then my recent working as a solo artist, it's a song called You and I, which I think I released in 2022, which is by far my favorite song that I've done. And it was one I put together quite quick, but I just love it. I think it's cool. It's got one of my favorite sound designs that I ever came up with in the pre-chorus.
What is that?
I cannot remember what I used to create it, but it's like an evolving pad sound that uses the mod wheel. So it goes like that. But that sounds pretty bad. But when you listen to the song, you'll hear it.
I'll understand. Yeah.
To pick it out. But for me, it's a really subtle one. It was a subtle one, but I was just like, oh, I love this sound design. I think I've lost the patch, so I'll have to recreate it somehow. But that song and the vocal on it as well, I really like. I think she did a really good job on the vocal on that. Yeah, that's probably my favorite one that I've released as a solo artist.
All right.
And do you still play guitar on some of these tracks?
Yeah, so the stuff I released last year, there's guitar on it. You and I doesn't, but the EP I released last year does have guitar. I don't play the lead guitar. I've got some friends of mine to play lead, but I play like the rhythm and some basic lead. Like there's a song called Lost and Found where I do a little lead motif at the beginning. But I got my friend Tim Benson, who's an artist called R9 I'm really good friends with, and he did the lead guitar on it. So that's kind of the direction the stuff I'm doing now is moving. It's like synth pop synth wave, but with guitars as well. So there's like lead guitar on it, is just filling out the sound because I didn't want to rely entirely on synths. And I've always used an actual bass guitar as well. I don't rely on synth basses, and I just find having actual bass just really does fill out those low mids and those low frequencies. And for me, there's nothing really that compares to actually having a bass guitarist laying down some bass. It just, for me, it's that and vocals that really open a track up, I find.
Yeah, true.
I'm going to drill down real quick on that. When you track your bass, are you doing direct with some in the box emulation of amplifiers and cabinets, or do you have like your favorite bass head with a cabinet and you mic it? Like what? How are you doing this?
It's all in the box. So I will lay down scratch bass, and then I'll get my friend to come in, and he lays down the actual bass that I use, and it's all in the box. So we'll DI it, and then I'll capture the raw bass, and then I use THU, I think it is, bass emulation. It's got some really cool ones, so I use that. To be fair, Logic, the built-in Logic ones are really good as well. SansAmp is another good one. I think that's
yes. So we used to have a SansAmp DI box. So when you say DI, do you have a box that's, quarter-inch to XLR that is going into an IO, and what is that IO and what is that box? I'm just curious.
I can't remember. He brings the DI, and I cannot remember. It might actually be Sans. It might be a Sans.
Is it kind of black and it's got yellow knobs on it?
Yeah. I think it is. You've got
Probably
orange text. Could do, or is it green? But then I don't know. And then I've got an SSL2 plus interface. I love SSL. I love the sound of SSL. And I was like, I cannot have an SSL desk. I don't have that money kicking around, so I'll get the next best thing.
Someday, though, right?
Oh, it'd be nice. I would love it. There's an interesting story, but I'll be really short with it because I appreciate the time. But when I was I was working in a studio, and we had this Audient desk. I remember the day before I was working on an SSL, and this time it wasn't free, so I was then working on this Audient. And then we had beers in the studio, and I wasted a beer on the desk, and it just went like that. And my heart, like, I've never known anything like it or since. Like, I honestly didn't know what to do, but it came back to life. Hairdryer, and one of the groups, the routing didn't quite work, but it was an old desk, and I was like, they'll just assume that the desk is gone. But it just reminds me, like, that could have been so different. It could have been the duality, and that would have been 100,000+, and I would have been, yeah. So that was another steep learning. From then on, it was beers on the floor, not
absolutely.
I just turned around from the desk, bang, knocked it over it, and
there you go. No beer or cocaine on the mixing board.
No, all on the floor. All on the.
Well, you mentioned time, and you have been obviously more than generous with yours, and we really appreciate it. Thank you for being with us. So do you have any more questions, Mike?
I don't, but unless you have any questions for us.
I'll throw one back out. Have you got any exciting projects that you guys are working on at the moment?
Long story short, I was really into this in high school, through college, and afterwards for a little bit, and then I had a different life, and that life ended, and now I'm getting back into it. So my first thing I'm going to do, there's a lot of unfinished ideas.
Yeah.
And I recently just found an old cracked copy of Cubase that would load my old stuff, and I converted them to the new version, and so I'm slowly getting there. But I want to be active and put stuff out all the time. That's the goal. Not dissimilar from you, as in I can't sing worth a shit, so I need to find people that can, and collaborate with them. But collaboration's a lot easier at this stage in my life. The older I get, the more I want to collaborate and see the benefits of it rather than the downside of that's not my vision. I mean, usually collaborating, I get the result is better than my vision anyway. So that's where I am.
Well, and mine's not that much different from Mike's. I am sitting now in the bedroom of what was my stepson's bedroom, but he has since gone to college. That's his Batman poster right there. That's out of focus right now. But and so he's moved out of the house, which means I get a studio back. So I get to, plug all the things back in, and I have my daughter she's getting close to being out of the house, and so we'll have less to do with her and more time to make some music, and who knows what'll happen from there. So
I bet. Fantastic stuff. And it'd be so nice to be able to sing, wouldn't it? Go back to what Mike Nimitz was saying there. It's being able to sing on you. It would make life so much easier. My fiance, I swear she can sing, but she refuses to do anything, to sing. Like, I hear her singing all the time. I'm like, you do realize you can sing? She's like, oh, yeah. You can save me so much hassle, but no, that's cool. You have to share, like, when you have projects like out and releasing stuff, share them with me. It'd be great. And
absolutely. Well, we'll probably get you to mix and maybe master them.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Right now, I was like, oh, I don't have to mess with that. And sometimes even though I could mix something, I'm too close to it. The things that need to be done aren't always obvious. And I solve that by putting them off and then coming back to them weeks later with a fresh set of ears. But it'd be nice to have somebody else take a look and be like, what did you do?
Yeah, I do agree. And I always send my mixes, again, go back to this chap I know called R9. I always send mixes out to him because I'm just like, I trust his ears. I'm always like, mate, can you hear anything going on here? So yeah, you need that break to regain some form of objectivity, but I find it's quite hard sometimes when you're so invested in your own projects. So yeah, outsourcing can sometimes be the way forward. But yeah, please.
Yeah.
And
we each have older stuff out there that you can listen to. I can send you some links, but and I'm not embarrassed by it. It's just not what I'm doing now.
Yeah,
it's dated and old, and yay. And I still listen to it every once in a while too. So probably
same. And I still have some bangers that I think are great, but we did that in '97.
Wow.
Yeah.
that's 97. What was I doing in 97?
It's been a minute.
Mine's a little more recent than that. Mine has a 20 in front of it at least.
Yeah.
2010, 2014, whatever.
I've got music videos on YouTube when I was in this band, and we when we get together and we have a few beers or barbecue or whatever, we always put them on and fucking laugh because we're watching these videos and we're like, this is so cringe.
Yes.
But, we leave them there because they're funny, and we come back to them every now and again.
Oh yeah, greatness, but yeah, nothing you want to show anybody.
No. There's always a story behind it as well. Oh yeah, I was really hungover at that point. Or we went out the night before, or we had to drive across the country and something was missing, or somebody didn't turn up or something. So it's always, that's a great thing about music and being in bands. I find like it's just traveling around.
It's the part nobody tells you about.
Yeah, 100%.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, gents. Thanks for inviting me on. I love talking music and whatnot. It's a passion, as it is for you guys. So yeah, it's great.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. I'll leave now. I'll leave you to it. It's been a pleasure. Stay in touch, guys. And
right.
Tunes, send them across when you have them. I'd love to have a listen.
Definitely. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
See ya.
Mike's on my